Good evening. It's Wednesday, December 1st. Happy Wednesday. Happy December. I'm going to talk today about something that might seem silly or frivolous, but I really don't mean it that way. And that is the issue of loving clay and abusive relationships. That's what I mean by not being silly. Okay. I don't want to joke about abusive relationships. But people all the time talk about when they fell in love with clay or being in love with clay or so forth and so on. And I'm happy for them. I'm one of them too. I'm in love with clay. But I want to warn about the potential for your love affair to become an abusive relationship. And and in many of the ways that romantic relationships with people can become abusive. And of course, the first thing is the idea that you should suffer, or you should be willing to suffer, or you should be willing to put up with something, more or less as an expression of your sincerity or the strength of your love or something like that. And that alone can lead to a lot of pain and suffering that really you shouldn't be signing up for. So it can range from something as simple as, I love touching clay, but it dries out my skin. Okay, so some say you love touching clay, but it doesn't love being touched, or whatever. It's fighting back. Okay, well, part of the way you deal with that is you admit it to other potters, other people who deal with clay, and you say, I have this problem, the clay dries out my skin, and they give you solutions. Okay, so don't suffer in silence. Don't just assume that that's something that comes with the territory, or that everybody's putting up with it, and that nobody else is whining about it. Okay, from my perspective, the solution. I mean, my first semester, I had I had I was bleeding from the knuckles. I was so chapped, and what I had to learn to do was to wash my hands frequently, and that's just with water. I mean, not soap, because that's going to dry things out more. But as you're working, you do stuff. You bend and pick clay up. Just wash it off in the slop bucket. Towel off. Start again. And then at the end of the session, apply lotion, and maybe again lotion again, and half an hour after that, or so forth and so on. So this combination of not letting the clay sit on your hands and using lotion solved the problem for me, and it can solve the problem for you, and you don't have to suffer with that. Okay, so that's at the simple end. Clay dries out my skin. And then you get the whole range of physical things like, wedging is hard on my back. Why does it hurt so much when I throw 100 pots? All kinds of things that are physical. Okay, well, there are answers to all of that. And again, part of the answer is to not keep it a secret and ask around and figure out what other people's solutions were, because they've all had the same problems, or at least enough of them have had the same problems that they'll offer you a range of solutions. And then there are things like finances. I spend all kinds of money on clay, but it never spends any money on me. Why am I the only one contributing financially to this relationship? Okay, well, again, the answer is talk to other potters, figure out how they went from a situation in which their love of clay was a net financial loss, gradually to the point where the clay was turning a profit, and maybe even a handsome profit. You don't have to invent it all yourself. And of course, you're not going to solve the problem by sitting in silence and assuming that the answers should be obvious, because they're not obvious. And then there are, sadly, the cases that are more extreme, where you are in love with clay, but clay is so not in love with you back that it is potentially irreparably harming your life or your body, whatever, maybe your psychology. And I'm thinking then of things like, carpal tunnel syndrome and things like that, where the type of clay work you want to do, your body can't do. So, and maybe that's a situation where you just have to admit that as much as you love it, you have to leave it. You have to get away from it. I had a friend who went from clay to jewelry, from jewelry to bookbinding. And I think that's part of the magic too. Is that just because you love clay doesn't mean you can't love something else, which also leads to another thing where potentially you're polyamorous and you love clay and woodworking and glass blowing and la la la, and you have to deal with a limited number of hours in the day and the week and the month, and one field of endeavor getting jealous of another, and that's a whole other different struggle. I have no particular solution to offer to that other than, as in all romances, take care of yourself, rest when you can. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Have a good evening.